Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options and Play video update. So it's Friday. You know what that means. It's like my tagline, right? Friday at Options and Plays, earnings on the radar day. And while this week was a very, very busy one, there is plenty to look forward to next week also. Um, so without further ado, let's jump into it here. Uh, so Monday morning, aka Super Bowl hangover day, right? Seems like most companies are smart enough not to schedule conference calls for the morning after the Super Bowl, but there actually is one interesting name, and I feel bad for the management that have to wake up early to hold it. But ALXN, so pricing in about 8.5 points. Been pretty consistent. Nice streak of beat, solid guidance. Right in the middle of like a new drug launch, which is going pretty well. Pushing up into resistance here, right? You know, thinking a nice speculative bullish bet. Another good number. It's got a head of steam. Could make a run, retest the resistance with like some open room up into like the 130s, right? You know, decent numbers. Decent numbers recently, decent stock action, decent technical setup. So, a speculative bullish bet, like a call fly in this case. All right. After the bell Monday, Google. It's going to be one of the main events for next week, if not the main event. Um, I actually really like Google a little bit more than most of the other Fang setups. Um, it's been range bound, right? So been range bound for about 4 months now, 1100 to the 1000 area, and it's really it's due for a breakout or breakdown. Pricing in 58 points or so. Uh, Last quarter was mixed, but Facebook had pretty good ad metrics, right? And some of like the Fang names that were, it's been mixed performance in the Fang names, but in terms of ones that maybe have an impact on Google, Facebook was pretty good, right? So pricing in 58 points though, pushing up at the top of resistance, really clean open room up to 1200, right? So about $100 higher. On the downside, right, if it fails here, in range has dictated prices maybe all the way down to 1,000. So, you're looking at possibly $100 either way. Stock has been super tight consolidation, priced in 58 points. So to me, it just seems like it's an interesting volatility bet, right? Like a strangle or a straddle. Just looking for a move to exceed that 58. Tight consolidation. Seems like clean levels to work with. I just really like that setup. So that's one I have circled going into next week. Also, Monday after the close, Gilead. It's priced in 3.25, so about 3.25 points. The big question mark with Gilead is going to be NASH data and whether or not it comes out. Um, it's expected early this quarter. So, a lot of people are thinking that it could come out with earnings this week, and data is going to trump whatever the earnings or revenue say, honestly. Analysts, if you've listened to me just recently, I've been talking about it, but analysts are predicting, anywhere from like a 10 to 20% move if positive. On the downside, it's a little bit harder to estimate, but, if the data does come out, it's probably going to trump whatever they end up saying for earnings and revenues. So, 3.25. But if data comes out, it's probably going to be, a decent amount more than that. All right. Tuesday morning, Estee Lauder. It's pricing about 8.5 points. Big beauty brand. Pretty consistent mover on earnings, right? Kind of sandwiched between a couple levels. 120 down on the downside, kind of pushing up into moving average resistance area. Um, Last quarter was good. And P&G just recently said high-end beauty sales were strong. So if anything, it's if we can get up through 140, then the room opens up. Things seem to indicate that like last quarter was good. Last quarter was good. There's been some positive comments on the beauty just recently. So it's priced at 8.5 points, but maybe you think you can get up into like the mid 140s, maybe high 140s if positive, and it kind of gets through this moving average top right here. All right. Also Tuesday, Momentum LITE. It's priced in at about 6.5 points. This thing was absolutely eviscerated back in November on an early warning. It's off that low, but still kind of hanging out. It's like it's kind of hanging out. underneath would have been pretty important support, right? You can see here, pretty important support. It's underneath some moving averages. Um, I honestly think this could still have a pretty big move, even though it's like, it's up about 10% just in the last couple of days. But, obviously a really well-defined gap above. It has plenty of room down, almost 12, 13 points just to retest the low from a few weeks ago. Uh, Thinking strangle or straddle candidate here. I know options are on a little bit on the higher side, but really well defined gap up, plenty of room lower. So right now, like there's a put spread open, so we'll probably have to update that before earnings. So keep an eye out for that. Tuesday after the close, EA, one of the big gaming stocks. So it's actually going to be an interesting week for gaming stocks because you have EA and Take-Two, which I'll get to in a second. So EA priced in about 7.5 points. It's really ugly action just up until the beginning of this year, right? Finally bounced, but it's still way off its high. It's coming off back-to-back weak quarters, and Activision just cratered recently. Right here, right? So Activision just got hit right here. Seems like the trend is lower. Thinking maybe a bearish bet, looking for retracement back down into like that trend, right? Like back down to like the low 80s, 80 range. But with EA and Take-Two both reporting next week, it kind of opens up the possibility of playing Activision, right? So that's what I meant. Why it's an interesting week, because you have EA and Take-Two, so the lone man out is Activision. You might get a sympathy trade on it. It's like, odds are if EA and Take-Two move, Activision's going to move. So I kind of like those scenarios where you have like, two or three really like or very similar companies reporting, and one has earnings and one doesn't, and options are priced, with the differences on the catalyst, right? So EA, Take-Two, probably looking at Activision just as a sympathy trade. Shutterfly, pricing about 6 points. This one's averaged about 12.5 points the last 3 quarters when it's reported. Here, it's had some really big moves. It's been absolutely rocked, just in this really steady downtrend. 15% short interest, still relatively high. It seems like it's a good strangle candidate. Appears to be visibility for about $10 either way, right? So it's just kind of sandwiched right in between. Hanging above the 50-day, but 10 points higher to the 100-day, right? It's about 54, 55, 10 points down to retest the low, 30, 35 area. So about $10 either way. Has a history of moving 12.5, but it's pricing in about 6. So, I kind of like that one. Even though it might not be a household name or go-to trading name, it does seem that this quarter is a pretty interesting setup for Shutterfly. Snap, also Tuesday after the close. So it's pricing in about 1 point, about $1. Things still down in the dumps, but it's starting to turn the corner, right? You can see starting to get a little momentum, traded up through the 100-day today. I honestly don't know if there's a whole lot to do here, but it does seem like the risk reward favors the bull side, if anything. Not totally convinced I want to be involved, but if anything, risk reward probably expectations are awfully low. So if they manage to, if they manage to beat low expectations, maybe get squeezed. You've seen that with like a ton of names this quarter. Low expectations, companies are in line, report numbers in line, and things like squeeze. So maybe Snap falls into that category. Tableau, really nice looking setup here. Software stock just kind of flagging underneath the recent high. If you go back even further, it looks even better, right? So it's just flagging right underneath all-time high. Coming off a great quarter here. Stock is acting great. Software stocks are acting great. Thinking another leg up if the numbers look good. So maybe like a call spread or call fly. Options are priced in about 13 points. So they're on the high side, but everything looks pretty bullish here. So. NOW just had a monster breakout, so I'm thinking like this could follow suit. So maybe a call spread or a call fly, something like that. Also Tuesday, Disney. priced in at about 4 points. So this one's been kind of out of play for a while. Had a it was holding in this. It was holding. Finally gave way in December, but now it's like basically V reversal, snapped right back. Now it's consolidating around 110 again. Honestly, I really only like the name for a move through 120. I mean, that's really like the level I'm focused on, which is obviously a far, it would need a pretty big move just to get there. So, I'm probably going to be on the sidelines for this. Probably just wait and see. I like the name from a longer term perspective, but it's not really like at a interesting area or an interesting setup this quarter. So even though it's one that I like, I probably will be on the sideline. That's my thinking at the moment. All right, before the open Wednesday, Lily, farmer name, probably if not the best farmer name, easily like top two. It probably is the best farmer to be honest. So the price in about 4 points. They already gave guidance though, so 4 points after already giving guidance. These options seem maybe a price a little bit too high. So uh, you know really great trend. Things responded well. It had a nice acquisition at the J.P. Morgan conference, and it's taking that in stride. Yeah, I feel like it wants to go higher, but I don't know if earnings are going to be a big catalyst because they already gave guidance. So maybe a calendar call spread, right? Kind of similar to how we approached Starbucks this past week. So take two, I talked about. They're priced in at 9.5 points, but again, probably looking at Activision just for a trade for the week because you have EA and Take Two. But Take Two's priced in at 9.5 points. Spotify, priced in at about 12 points. So it's been pretty quiet in Spotify. You haven't really heard much about it. It's been flying under the radar. In terms of earnings, it's traded lower 2 out of the first 3 quarters. It's been public, and it was hit even after decent results last quarter. So it's probably a show me story. Something that I don't think. I mean, like the numbers have been pretty good, but the reactions haven't been great. I think like my gut says this is something you want to wait and see, if they can turn the corner, because then maybe momentum really starts to build as people pile back in. But 12 points, it seems like it's a little bit on the higher side of what it's moved in the past, and it just doesn't seem like that great of a setup into earnings. So probably be on the sideline, but if it's a really strong print and it gaps up and holds, then maybe it could be one of those names that turns into like a go-to name, right? People start to buy or get more interested in it. Okay, after the close Wednesday, Chipotle, it's priced in at about 42 points, and man, oh man, what a move that's had. It's basically parabolic going into earnings, which really makes for a tough setup. It's right at the top of multi-year resistance. I mean, look at this, right at the top of multi-year resistance, right? But it's up. It's basically up 140 points without a pullback. So just a really tough setup. 42 points. It's not. That would be about double what it moved last quarter. But if it's good and it breaks out, then it's clearing like 3 month resistance, 3 year resistance, and it could really go. I mean, 600 could be like a pretty nice target. And obviously, if it's bad, I mean, it's up 150 points in a little over a month, so it could be a decent amount to retrace. I almost like approach it like Boeing this past week, where you have. Maybe take a shot on some like speculative, like way out of the money options, just saying that, there's potential, maybe like smaller potential for a really big move, but if options, you can get options for like a decent price that are maybe like 600 and like 450, like something like deep out of the money, but if the stock has a really wild move, then maybe you could like potentially capitalize something like that. That's really, I mean, outside of that, I mean, it's just such like a aggressive run into numbers. It makes it kind of tough. FireEye, pricing about 1.75, so like 175. Almost broke out of a multi-year consolidation back in November, December, but it's failed. Now it's back down into like kind of like the chop area. Uh, I honestly like the only way this is interesting is if it's like a blowout and gets back to 20. I mean, it's been in this range for so long that it's just tough to really get super bullish until it can get through 20. I mean, you can see like the longer out you go, you can see how important 20 is. So, um, you know, maybe there's been some good numbers in the cyber name so far. So maybe like a longer dated call right at that 20 level. Thinking if it's good and it pops, maybe you get that finally after so many tries, get that pent up breakout. So that's what I'm thinking. Maybe like a lower debit, longer dated option, like up around the 20, maybe 21 area. O'Reilly. Uh, okay, pricing about 22 points, and you can see really tight range bound action for the last 5 months. So a move is due here. Uh, visibility for maybe like a $30-$40 move. Pricing at about 22. So Strangle seems interesting. What's also good about O'Reilly is that you could possibly get sympathy trades in AutoZone or AAP. Both of those are most likely going to react to the O'Reilly numbers, like auto part names, right? So I have that one on the radar. You're going to have to wait and see. Sometimes the options can be a little bit thinner, so I'll have to wait and see what they look like going into next week. All right, Thursday before the open, Grubhub. I like this one. 10.5 points. So it's averaged 19 points the last 2 quarters. It's priced in 10.5 going into earnings this coming week. It's been in a really tight consolidation after getting whacked, with plenty of room higher and plenty of room lower. Right? And look at this. You can see. It's just it seems like it's at 10.5. Like there's room either way. Maybe room up to right, like room up to the 100 area. So that's like almost like 20. And then just to retest the low would be about 15 points just from December. So definitely thinking, well, not definitely, but thinking maybe like a strangle, right? Pricing in 10.5. Seems like there's visibility for maybe like a 15, even like 20 points either way. I mean, that would put it in line with like the last 2 quarters, what it's moved here, about 19 the last 2 quarters. So I definitely have that one circled going into next week. TPR, so that's Coach and Kate Spade combination company. They haven't guided holiday quarter yet, so it could be a pretty big mover. It's averaged about 6 points over the last 3 quarters, and this is the biggest quarter of the year, right? The holiday quarter. So at 3 points, it's averaged about 6 over the last 3 quarters. So maybe for a trade, I think maybe leaning more to the downside just because retail's had kind of like a rough stretch here. But I'll look at it. It's not my favorite retail name going into next week, though. I'll talk about the other one in a minute or so. Twitter, also Thursday before the open. It's priced in about 4.25. So coming off like a really great print here. Stock is hung in nicely for the most part. I mean, had like a late dip, but for the most part, hanging in pretty nicely. Flagging with resistance, right? Facebook just had strong numbers, so I like it possibly for a breakout. I mean, if they can deliver again and it gets through 36, 37, I mean, look at this like monster gap up from like the July report. So thinking maybe like spreads, something like that, like targeting a move into this July gap, but definitely thinking bullish into this one just after last quarter, Facebook, and the overall price action in the stock. Thursday after the close. All right, Expedia. It's priced in about 9 points. It's it's kind of in no man's land technically, in a steady downtrend. Right, had a lackluster response to earnings last quarter, and options are priced kind of underneath its average, but it just seems like it's like a tough setup overall. In terms of like tech, it seems that Booking and Expedia, even like TripAdvisor, they don't really get the same interest as some of the others. Maybe look at Booking as a sympathy trade. We tried this one last quarter, and and it didn't work out great. So I'm more hesitant with it, just because like the setup isn't as good as it even was like last quarter. But could potentially be a mover. It's priced at 9 points. Maybe. It's had a couple quarters where it's moved 20, so it's potentially a big mover, but and I don't have a really great read on that one. All right, Skechers. So this is one I was talking about in terms of retail. That's priced in 3.5 points. There's been a lot of weird action on this thing recently. You can see like these big tails. Like yesterday was a crazy day. A lot of weird action. There's been some M&A chatter floating around. Um, you know, just outside of that, it's the holiday quarter, so it's a big report. Um, Last quarter was a slightly smaller move than it had been averaging, but it was still greater than 5 points. So, pricing in 3.5. Last quarter was one on the smaller side, and that was still above 5. So, options seem like there's some room there. You've had some like really wild moves on this name over the last year when it's reported, and it's been some really weird action going on. So, thinking like that's one that I'll be looking at both ways, right? So if it breaks out, there's a big gap. If not, retest like the low 20s. And then last but not least, Friday morning, Cody. So pricing in just a little under $1, about 90 cents or so. Tried this one a couple times recently, and it hasn't paid. The setup is a little bit better this quarter. As you can see, like the stock's starting to clear some like downtrend resistance right above the 50-day. Maybe speculative bullish bet. Just a lot of beaten up names have rebounded. This one seems like it might be trying to turn the corner. Tried that one the last 2 quarters though, and it hadn't really worked out. But third time the charm, maybe. So that's that. So plenty to look forward to next week. It's going to be another busy week. Super Bowl on Sunday, but we have our options coaching session on Monday after the close. So come ready. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I'm just joking, but it's nice timing with these coaching sessions back to back, because it kind of falls in like the two busiest weeks of the quarter. So just nice timing in that regard. So bring questions about upcoming trades, anything you guys want to hear. Want to go over a lot of like the names they're going to be reporting next week, more in depth, kind of like break down the ideas, the trading strategies, what we're looking at, so on and so forth. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and I'll talk to you all on Monday.